If you're anything like me, you love MMORPGs. Not modern MMORPGs, which water down the thrill with handheld mechanics and a tutorial that treats you like you've never touched a keyboard before. In a modern MMO, early levels are a joke, and the game revolves around a quick grind to the level cap so you can finally enjoy the content. You click a monster, your character auto-attacks, and you win. Dying takes active effort, failing feels like a forgotten dream. You just exist until the game decides you're allowed to have fun. I miss the days of old school hardcore MMOs when the journey actually had stakes, where a rat could kill you if you weren't paying attention, and where logging off meant your progress actually mattered. So I decided to build my own. Welcome back. Over the last few weeks, I hit what I'd call my first real milestone, an almost finished beginner island, 17 interconnected zones, 62 items, and enough content to take a player from levels 1 to 10. But finishing it wasn't just about placing monsters on a map. Outside of what I think is a pretty slick chat system, I spent many painstaking hours reworking formulas, numbers, and features to make the game feel balanced and importantly actually fun to play. Today I want to get into the details of that. The stat system, how gear works, how skills work, and why I made some of the design decisions that I did. So let's get into it. Let's start with stats, because this is the foundation everything else is built on. Eldir has 3 core offensive stats: strength, dexterity, and intelligence. I want to make it clear that these do not lock you into a class. There are no classes in this game. Stats are just raw fuel for your gear. Let me explain what I mean. Strength is your raw physical power and durability. It adds flat damage to heavy weapons, your two-handed swords, your axes. It's also the strict requirement for wearing heavy armor, which gives you the highest defense in the game and access to the tankiest, most CC resistant playstyle. Dexterity is precision and mobility. It fuels finesse weapons like daggers and ranged weapons like bows. Dex builds are designed around high single target damage, mobility, and managing physical resources such as arrows or bolts. Intelligence is your source of magic. It powers wands and staffs, gives you the longest reach on the combat grid, and unlocks the most area of effect spells. The trade-off? Int builds are incredibly fragile, and their skills come with massive mana costs. Now here's the kicker. You get 3 stat points per level to spend however you want. Pumping points into both strength and dexterity doesn't break your character, it actually rewards you by unlocking hybrid weapons like spears and skills like lunge that scale off both. Instead of locking yourself into a single linear path, you're building something that resonates with your playstyle. This feeds directly into how gear works, so let me expand on that. There are 3 categories of armor, and each one complements different build choices in a different way. Heavy armor has the strongest defensive profile in the game. The trade-off is that it has increasingly high strength requirements as you progress, which makes it most suitable for strength-focused or strength hybrid builds. Perfect choice if you want to be the person who stands in the middle of a fight. Medium armor sits in the middle. Average defensive profile, no stat requirements. It's the default choice for builds that don't invest heavily in strength but still want survivability. Then there's light armor. Lowest defense in the game, but it gives you something the others don't. Intrinsic bonuses to your energy resources. Percentage increases to your maximum energy pool, and flat bonuses to energy regeneration. This helps make light armor feel less like a sacrifice and more like a meaningful, rewarding trade-off for the right build. I chose this design deliberately. Rather than just slapping different stats requirements on each armor type, I wanted each category to have its own identity. And I think it becomes most interesting with hybrid builds, which don't have an obvious default preference. A strength intelligence spellblade, for example, might mix heavy armor for survivability with careful skill selection to manage their mana. That kind of decision making is what I think makes build variety interesting. Weapons follow the same philosophy. Different weapon types have different stat distributions, and those distributions reflect what it actually makes sense to use them with. A wand doesn't need strength or dexterity, you need intelligence and magical proficiency. A spear, on the other hand, requires some finesse and some strength to use efficiently, which makes it one of the best weapons for a dex-strength hybrid build. One thing I was very deliberate about in designing all of this is that stats and weapon power scale linearly, not exponentially. The reason is simple. I don't want a level 100 casually one-shotting a level 90. I don't want combat outcomes to be fully decided by stats and level. A slightly lower level player should be able to be a higher level player if they outskill them. That uncertainty is what I think makes PvP interesting. Exponential scaling kills that. It turns players into walking gods, and balancing becomes a nightmare because even small differences in level or gear create massive disparities in power. Linear scaling keeps things tight, keeps skills relevant, and makes the world feel more dangerous for everyone, not just for new players. Okay, so you've got your stats, you've picked your gear, now let's talk about skills, because this is where the combat actually comes alive. There's no auto attack in Eldir. Every single action in combat is a deliberate choice. Even your basic strike is a skill, and skills in this game aren't just damage numbers, they're tactical shapes on a grid. Let me show you what I mean. A basic strike hits the single tile directly in front of you. Simple. A lunge extends 2 tiles forward in the direction that you're pointing, which is good for closing distance or catching a fleeing enemy. A cleave sweeps 3 tiles horizontally in a wide arc. Each skill has a shape, and that shape determines how you need to position yourself to use it effectively. You have to think about where you're standing and what's about to hit you back. I also built in recovery frames. After you use a skill, you're committed for a short window before you can act again. It's a small thing, but it completely changes the feel of the combat. You can't spam abilities mindlessly. Every attack has weight and consequence. Now, how do you actually get skills? Not through leveling up, and not through a class selection screen. You find them. Skills in Elder are learned through skill books. Some you can buy directly from NPC merchants in towns, some are dropped by specific monsters, and others are hidden, tucked away in a chest in an obscure corner of the map, or rewarded through dialogue with specific NPCs. You can't use lunge if you're not holding a spear or a rapier, it physically doesn't make sense. And each skill scales based on different stats most relevant to it. Lunge, for example, scales off both dexterity and strength, which is why it's so good for hybrid builds using a spear. A fireball scales off intelligence. A cleave scales primarily off strength. There's one more piece to this that I want to explain, because I think it's one of the most interesting design decisions I made. In many RPGs, skills have fixed damage value. A level 1 fireball does 10 damage. By level 50, that fireball is useless. You've outscaled it completely, and it's just taking up hotbar space. You end up replacing skills constantly, and nothing you learn early ever matters again. I don't want that. In Elder, skills don't have fixed damage. A skill is a grid shape and a damage multiplier. The weapon provides the base damage. Cleave does 0.9 times your weapon's damage in a horizontal arc, always. What changes as you progress is the weapon, not the skill. But here's the balancing layer on top of that. The weapon also dictates the mana cost of each skill you use with it, and that cost scales with the weapon's power level. Think of weapons like engines. A copper sword has low damage, but swinging your cleave skill only costs 5 energy. A late game dragon greatsword hits for massive damage, but that exact same cleave skill now costs 50 energy. The skill never becomes useless, but the stronger your weapon gets and the more skills you acquire, the more carefully you have to manage your resources. One of my biggest inspirations is Tibia, and one thing that made that game feel magical was a world that was genuinely easy to get lost in. You'd walk in a direction, find something unexpected, and suddenly an hour passed. That's what I'm going for here. There's still quite a bit to do before I'd call the beginner island truly finished. I want to add more skills, place chests in different corners of the map, and create more corridors and hidden pathways that reward players who just follow their curiosity. The world needs more density, more reason to take a left turn instead of a right one. On the feature side, a mini-map is on a list, along with some basic quests, a player trading system, and a more fleshed out PvP system. The bones are there, we just need more of them. But the core loop, exploring, fighting, getting stronger, finding something new, that's working, and honestly that's the part I was most unsure about. On that note, thank you for watching this devlog. I have changed the style and format compared to my previous video, so I hope I am going in the right direction. As always, if you have any feedback, positive or negative, please let me know. I want to make sure that I shape the game in the right direction. See you next time.